Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me back here at Jacobstown up on Mount Charleston to continue with our chat about the Super Mutants and the different varieties that have come about since they were first created. So we are back in the west coast area for the Nightkin. So, polite note, the Nightkin don't like to be looked at, so don't stare at them for too long. They get uncomfortable and a bit upset about that, so, be kind. But the Nightkin originated from the Unity and the Mariposa military base. So they were the Master's elite soldiers. They were given superior weapons as well as stealth boys. So when you're exploring the cathedral in the original Fallout game, you do see them as kind of ghostly, transparent, but you can still see them where they are in the level, but they're kind of transparent because they're using the kind of stealth boys, which makes sense because the stealth boys was a sort of new age technology that was really kept for military purposes for the most part. So not the easiest piece of equipment to come by, and we know that the Master had his perfect Nightkin that were set a level above the rest of the Super Mutants in that way. So most of the Nightkin really firmly believed in the Master's vision, and they believed in the Unity. So when the Master was defeated in 2161, they were scattered to the wind and left to find their own paths, and a lot of them travelled around, and quite a number headed east and ended up here in the Mojave Wasteland area around Vegas. But the Stealth Boys had quite a major impact on the Nightkin. It basically, because it gave them the ability to kind of hide and not be seen, and also because of the specific radiation that was produced by these devices that caused the invisibility, that had an impact on their brain chemistry, and they also preferred not to be seen. So this led them to developing some pretty serious mental health problems like schizophrenia. So I think it's important to, talk about a few of these things. So mental health is a big topic. It can be a heavy topic, and I do understand that. I am not a psychologist or psychiatrist. As you know, my background is in veterinary medicine, so everything that I'm talking about here is based on my own research, and if you do have any concerns about yourself or someone you know, then seek help from a licensed professional. So I'm not gonna, nothing that I say here can be used to confirm a diagnosis or anything like that. It's just for information and for interest. But many people kind of misunderstand what schizophrenia actually is, and it's termed as a psychosis where the person is unable to tell what's real and what isn't. So it's characterised by delusions, like the belief that someone is out to get them, or someone is sending them secret messages in some way, or secret signs. It's also characterised by hallucinations, so both visual hallucinations, so seeing things that aren't there, and auditory hallucinations, such as hearing voices in their mind that they think is someone talking to them and trying to convince them to do something, or trying to harm them in some way. An interesting side note here is that people with congenital blindness, so congenital means that they were born that way, doesn't always mean genetic. It can be just a result of development during pregnancy, that something doesn't develop properly, but congenital means that you're born with it. So people with congenital blindness have never been reported to develop schizophrenia, and nobody really knows why. So an interesting thing there that nobody really knows why that is the case, but that is the case, that nobody that was born blind has ever gone on to develop schizophrenia. So there's an interesting little fact for you. There's also things that you can see like disorganised speech, chaotic behaviour, loss of inhibitions, mood swings, inappropriate responses, so, potentially laughing when somebody tells you something really sad, that kind of thing. Difficulties with social interaction, lacking emotional expression, interest and enthusiasm, and these are all symptoms that can be related to schizophrenia, and it can be very distressing for both the person themselves and the people around them that are having to watch someone that they care about go through this kind of thing. It can be very, very distressing and very difficult to live with. So schizophrenia has been known to be triggered by things like stress, trauma, and the use of illicit drugs. We do know these things can also alter the brain chemistry, both the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, and how well the cells in the brain respond to these neurotransmitters. Sometimes people will say, oh yeah, mental health problems are a chemical imbalance in the brain, but it's still not clear whether the chemical imbalance is what comes first, or whether the changed emotional state and the changed mental state is what causes changes to the chemistry of the brain. Kind of a chicken and egg sort of question, really. But these neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, are sort of mood regulators and emotional regulators, among other things. And we also know that from the in-game lore that the process of actually becoming a super mutant is quite a painful one. You know, if you remember back when we looked at the Master and his diaries when he was going through his mutation and transformation, that he was experiencing a lot of pain and he was basically couldn't move for several days because of it, and then it eventually started to lessen. And you know, we know that pretty much all of these guys have very little memory of who they were before they became a super mutant. Lily is kind of an exception. She was a grandmother before she became a mutant in the Master's army, and she does still remember her grandchildren, and that's kind of central to her entire kind of companion quest, which we'll talk about a wee bit more later on. But we do know that the process of this, going through this mutation, becoming a super mutant, is painful, and that adds trauma to the body and to the brain potentially as well. And then the other one that we sometimes see with some of the Nightkin is what the game kind of refers to as multiple personality disorder, but that name's not really in use anymore. The disorder is now called dissociative identity disorder, or DID. So that's the more correct term for this particular condition when we're talking about it nowadays. So it's characterised by what some people call a split personality, where the person's identity splits into two or more alters, which are the different personalities, the different identities within that one person, and the alters may or may not be fully aware of the other alters. That varies depending on how many there is, and basically it's all very much on the kind of individual circumstances, and the person can kind of shift into one of these identities, which is when that identity is fronting. And the alters can have different roles. They can be different ages, different genders. So it is kind of a complex thing to understand. And if you know somebody that has this condition, then you'll be aware that, you know, it can be difficult for them to function the way society wants them to function, because they have this condition where they have these different kind of identities that are kind of in their minds and things. So it's kind of a complicated thing to understand. Obviously it's not my area of expertise, so if you do want to find out more information, then definitely head to some trusted sources in the kind of psychology world that could give you more information about this. But what we do know is that DID is believed to be triggered by pretty serious trauma, and generally it's something that happens very early in life, so usually kind of before the age of 6 years old, where as a child they experience some pretty horrendous trauma, and the disorder develops as a way to kind of compartmentalise and protect the individual from further harm from this trauma. So that's generally the case. It's a kind of way of the mind protecting itself, essentially, and it does that by kind of splitting things away, and that is a way of helping that individual cope with what they've been through. So you know, it's definitely something that should be treated with a lot of understanding and a lot of kindness, because it has been caused by generally something pretty horrible happening to the person in their kind of early life. So with the Nightkin as well, paranoia is a very common feature. It is part of kind of the sort of group of schizophrenia, so paranoia is a major component of that, and that they don't like being looked at, they don't like being seen. So you do bump into them, you know, around the Mojave and various places. So we'll go and we'll find one of particular interest, so bear with me just a second. Okay, we're here in Novak, so there's Dinky the dinosaur, and we're going to pay a visit to this house down here. So behind this little tent where the caravans hang out, this is the McBride's house, and they are cattle farmers, so got a handful of Brahmin. And if you go in and speak to Dusty McBride, he does say, you know, something is attacking my cattle and killing them, and he'll ask you to see if you can find out who is doing it.
Look who's here.
Hello. Hi, don't go to bed, I need to talk. Nope. God damn it. Excuse me, sir. Hi. Came in to speak to you. Get up.
Hey there. In from out of town, ain't you?
Yep.
Name's Dusty.
Good to meet you. I hear you've been losing livestock.
Losing don't describe it. It's a massacre. A few more days and there won't be nothing left to lose.
Okay, what do you know about it?
Every night around midnight, Alice and I wake up to some crazy hollering and gunshots. You'd think the world was ending all over again. But it's just one animal each night. They don't take it or carve it up or nothing. Just leave it there, all full of holes.
Okay, I'll see if I can catch them.
I'd be grateful, especially if you find them before they get my whole stock. But don't go getting yourself killed over it. Alice and I'll find a way to make do. Always have.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
So long.
Yep, so he gives you this. It's an unmarked quest, so you'll see it added a note, and it's about the loss of the Brahmin. Ah, I see you. So, yep. Can you see? Nightkin master. So yeah, it's a tough one. A turn combat. Oh, God. I keep forgetting that I have that perk where using energy weapons causes explosions sometimes. So yep, here he is, the Nightkin master, and he has been the one that has been attacking the Brahmin the whole time. So he's got a minigun, so the Brahmin are full of holes because he's using rapid fire heavy weaponry. But he has this tape on him about the screams of Brahmin. So let's have a look at that in the notes. So yeah, this is for unmarked quests. You get a wee note that gets added to your notes tab that tells you about it in this game, which is really, really handy and way better than the way notes are handled in Fallout 4. I will die on that hill. It's stupid. I hope they fix it for the next game because it's just really frustrating. But yes, we've got this here. So most of what is recorded here is a mess of incomprehensible psychotic gibberish. It seems to express a general frustration towards a set of Brahmin who are allegedly keeping the author awake at night by screaming inside his head whenever he closes his eyes. So this poor guy that we have just kind of killed has been hearing the Brahmin in his head. It's causing insomnia, and he's had enough of not getting sleep, so he has been systematically attacking these Brahmin to try and silence the screams. So this is the kind of thing that pretty much all of these Nightkin are experiencing, and the impact that the use of stealth boys and things has had on their mental health. And Lily, as we talked about, we'll go back to her just now actually. So if we just head back to Jacobstown, yes. There we go. Hi Marcus. Don't need to be in sneaky mode anymore, these guys are friendly. which is nice. So yeah, back to Lily here. So she was from Vault 17, which is a vault that we never get to visit, but presumably was somewhere in the kind of California area. And she has developed schizophrenia, and she hears a voice in her head that has been named Leo. So part of her companion quest, because Lily is a potential companion, is to help her deal with the things. So Dr. Henry, who's the Enclave doctor that lives here, that has been working on helping the Nightkin and various things, he put her on to antipsychotics, which is a common thing to do with people that have schizophrenia in the real world, that, you know, there's medications that can help. And it has been helping her with the symptoms and with dealing with Leo, the voice, that is quite distressing for her. However, the side effect of the medication is that she has been losing her memories of her beloved grandchildren, so she has reduced the dose of the medication that she's been taking. So her companion quest, when you get to that, involves kind of trying to help her figure out what to do and how to approach things, which, you know, pretty much all the companion quests are about helping them make a decision, and the decision they make will impact how they function as a companion from then on, which is really interesting. So you can help her kind of deal with that. And Lily she's very sweet. She was a grandma.
Jimmy!
Yeah.
Little Jimmy! My, how you're grown up! So good of you to come visit your grandma.
Yeah, here's Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy, don't you go being silly now. Come over here and give your grandma some sugar.
Yeah, let's talk about something else.
Of course, Jimmy.
Yeah, so she's a wee bit confused sometimes,
dear.
poor dear, but you know, you can take her with you and she can help you out. I have to say, I like the detail, just looking at the gloves she's wearing there, that they're like gardening gloves, but they've obviously had to be kind of open, like cut open and stitched so that they fit her hands, because they're obviously, her hands are a lot bigger. Really interesting little side note there. It's, you know, that's one thing about being able to get a good close-up look at these characters sometimes, is that you get to see some of these little details in the art style, and she's got obviously all her gardening equipment, which looks too small for her massive hands, because she's obviously a lot bigger than your average human. It's really, really cute. But we know that these first generation mutants, so the Nightkin and the Super Mutants like Marcus and his buddies over here, were pretty intelligent and largely more reasonable, certainly compared to the mutants that we see in the East Coast, so the Vault 87 mutants and the Institute variety. Compared to that, these mutants are smarter, more reasonable, more logical, but obviously the effect of being given these stealth boys is that it has had quite an impact on the mental health of these Nightkin, and because they are big and strong, and even though they are more reasonable, they still do have a kind of increased tendency for aggression. It does make them potentially dangerous to people in the Mojave. So despite what people believe, mental health issues are just as debilitating as physical health issues. That's not an opinion, that is just a fact, and I know that from experience because I have all of these things. I have chronic health problems, I live with pain on a daily basis, so every single day I'm in pain. I don't remember the last time I had a day where I had zero pain. It's been far too long. I have joint issues, I have nerve issues, but I have also lived with mental health problems for quite a long time, on and off, and it's really, really difficult to kind of live like that. It can be difficult for the people around you as well. So just because something isn't a physical problem, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact, and potentially a serious impact, on someone's life. And the same applies to these guys, the Nightkin. I mean, we know that becoming a super mutant is painful, whether, you know, the mutations that they've experienced, whether that has any kind of impact on their physical functioning as well, and obviously, as we know, their kind of mental health. But the Nightkin aren't beyond reason. Pretty much all of the ones that you encounter, other than that one at the McBride's, you can kind of deal with peacefully. Lily is a good companion to have. She's good in a fight. and she's a bit of a sweet, she's a sweet old grandma. She's really funny. So she's a good companion to have with you. And I say with the Davison, who's the leader of the Nightkin that are at the rep contest site, who have been kind of at war with the Bright Brotherhood, the ghouls. It is possible, although it's not easy to do, it is possible to complete that quest without killing any of the Nightkin. Just be careful of Antler. But again, he's another example that he's projected the leadership onto this Brahmin skull that he calls Antler, and is treating it like it's a new deity that speaks only to him. And that's how they've obviously gone there looking for the stealth boys and things, so you can get them to leave peacefully by bringing them proof that the stealth boys are no longer there. It all kind of works out in that regard. So you can deal with that peacefully. Obviously Lily is a companion, you can deal with her peacefully. Keen, the mutant here, it's kind of part of the quests that you do for this place. Again, it doesn't need to come to violence, so it's very, very interesting. Whereas if you compare this to like Fallout 3, pretty much all your dealings with the super mutants, other than Fox again as a potential companion, and if you're lucky enough to stumble across Uncle Leo, but every other dealing with super mutants that you have in that game is just straight up, you have to kill them or they're going to kill you. You don't have any option for negotiation or conversation. Fallout 4, pretty much the same again, with the exception of the super mutant companion, which is strong in that game, and he's only willing to work with a human because Shakespeare's inspired him to make sure that they're better than humans. His reasoning's a bit funny, but other than that, again, the super mutants that you're coming across, the vast majority of them, they're just hostile. You just have to fight them or avoid them and deal with them that way. So I do think it's really interesting that in this side of the world that we're coming across super mutants who are more intelligent, they're more reasonable, you can speak to them, you can negotiate with them, you can, treat them like people, essentially. You can say, okay, well, I'll help you with this if you help me with that. You can do that with these guys to a point, which you just can't in the kind of East Coast variety. So I think that's a very interesting contrast, and I do wonder, obviously I know they've been filming for season 2 of the TV show, and we know it's pretty clear that we're heading to New Vegas in season 2, so I do wonder if we are going to have potentially a friendly super mutant character that gets involved in things. If Marcus is going to show up, if Lily's going to show up, or if it's going to be a different one. But I think they would. I mean, we know we didn't really see any super mutants in the first season, other than there was definitely one on a gurney in the Enclave base when what's his name, Wilzig, was leaving, and you just saw the green kind of hand sticking out of the sheet. So, there's a nice little hint there, and I do wonder if they are going to incorporate the super mutants to some degree in season 2. I really hope they do, because, I think it's really interesting, and, it's this kind of thing that they're kind of like the big green, angry, very much kind of Incredible Hulk coded, but that's not to say that they can't be, reasoned with and they can't be worked with, because, even the Hulk eventually accepted both sides of himself and merged together and all the rest of it. So I think it'd be very interesting to see. And it's not really their fault that they're like this. The mental health problems that they're suffering is because of largely the way they were elevated in their status among the Unity, and the effects of the stealth radiation, because we know that the stealth boys work by emitting some form of radiation that hides you from view. And as we know, radiation can cause damage. It can cause damage to the brain and the nervous system functions. It can cause damage to all parts of the body. And, mental health issues do have a physiological impact on the brain, on the neurotransmitters, on the function of the brain. And which is the cause and which is the effect is still very much up for debate, as I understand it. There's not really much consensus on that. You know, depression was at one point thought to be just a serotonin deficiency, which is why medications to treat that tend to increase the amount of serotonin in the brain. But now it seems more likely that actually it's the depression that causes the low serotonin. So it's a chicken and egg question that we don't really have a proper answer to. So I think that's something to bear in mind, and I think we need to respect the fact that, you know, these things can be difficult to deal with, and that we should have a bit more empathy for people that are suffering from mental illnesses, because it's not always entirely their fault, and it can be very difficult for them and very disabling for them, and I think people need to bear that in mind. So hopefully you found that interesting. I say psychology is something that I say it's an interesting thing for me. It's not my area of expertise, but I do like to read around it quite a lot and learn about it, and I think it's quite an interesting topic. So I like the Nightkin, and I like the kind of background to them and things. I think they make for sort of very interesting characters, and having these kind of non-human characters that are just still basically people, I think it keeps things interesting. So hopefully you enjoyed. As always, love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and keep an eye out next time. I'm in the process of drafting the script for the big video essay. My plan is to have that go live on the 24th of the month, so keep an eye out for that. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.